Okay, no, it's not my Bible. It's my husband's Bible, right? But it will do the job for today. My Bible is a lot smaller, but this one is bigger, and I can see the print clearly. So I would use this one today. You know, there's this joke I always uh, uh, tell my husband. I say, if you hit the devil with your Bible, the devil cannot recover. Isn't this big? Anyway, I love it, and it will do the job today. So let's get started. Matthew 5:33 to 37. I find myself going back to Matthew 5 anytime I study the Bible. Regardless of the chapter, verse, or verses I study, I would still close that study with Matthew 5. And if you've watched my last two videos, you would see that I discuss certain verse or verses within this particular chapter. And the good news is this: today's not going to be an exception. We will be looking at Matthew 5, but verses 33 to 37. Okay? But before we dig deeper, let me quickly share something with you. There was a time I would go into meetings, into discussions with the idea that my job was to win people over, to convince people to believe what I was sharing or what I was trying to pass across. Basically, the message I was trying to pass across. So I would go into meetings with all the energy, with all the passion, but with the mindset that by the time I was done, people should be convinced to believe what I had shared, right? I would do my due diligence. I would study. I would prepare. I would go there, as I said, passionately, with confidence, with all the energy. But there was something wrong. I would, again, believe that when I was done, people would agree with what I shared. But if you know, you would know that people don't agree with everything you say, right? People don't agree with everything you say. So most times I would get frustrated because I would be like, I have done the due diligence. I've done this homework. I've done this work. What I'm telling you is the truth. This is the fact, right? So why are you not getting it? Why are you not believing it, right? And when people have a different opinions or don't see it the way I expect them to see it, because I thought I had done the work, like what I was sharing was the truth. And in most cases, I had done the work, right? When people don't agree, right, I get frustrated and I put in more energy. I put in more energy trying to convince people. And by the time I was done, really, I was drained, right? But as I grew older, but most importantly, as I got closer to God, as I continued to work closely with God, as I started studying the scriptures intentionally, I realized that conviction wasn't my assignment to begin with, right? My job wasn't to convince people or to convict people, right? My job was really to study, to get prepared, to go in, to share the message passionately, to share the message with confidence, to share the message in love and with respect, knowing that people would still have to make their decision whether they agree with what I said or not. It wasn't my job to force them to agree. It wasn't my job to push them to agree, right? Some people would agree with my opinion. Some people would say, "Oh, I need to go do my research. I need to go understand what it is that you've said, explore, research, and then before making my decision." Others would be like, "Please, what are you sharing? Please." They would not even pay attention, right? So it wasn't my job to grab people and be like, today, you must agree with me. It wasn't my job. So that helped me really understand what I was supposed to do versus what I wasn't supposed to do. Now, why am I sharing this story with you? When I was reading these 5 verses, so Matthew 5, verses 33 to 37, I saw some similarities with the practice of oath taking and engaging in arguments. Let me repeat that again. I saw some similarities with the practice of oath taking and one engaging in arguments. And that similarity, let me just share one. That similarity is when you're taking an oath, you're trying to convince someone that what you're saying or what you're selling or what you're sharing is the truth. When you argue with somebody, you're practically doing the same thing. You're trying to convince that person that what you're saying is the fact, is the truth, right? So I saw some similarities there, and it took me back to those days, and I was like, if I had known, all I was supposed to do was go there, share, pass my message across, and let people decide on what they were going to do. Anyway, let's focus on the verses for today. Matthew 5, verses 33 to 37. And I have my Bible right here. Okay, no, it's not my Bible. It's my husband's Bible, right? But it will do the job for today. My Bible is a lot smaller, but this one is bigger and I can see the print clearly. So I would use this one today. You know, there's this joke I always uh, uh, tell my husband. I say, if you hit the devil with your Bible, the devil cannot recover. Isn't this big? Anyway, I love it and it will do the job today. So let's get started. Matthew 5:33 to 37. I've taken the time to read these 5 verses, and you would see that Jesus was tackling the issue of words. Okay, he was challenging the conventional understanding and practice of his time, but most importantly, he was calling his followers to a profound level of truthfulness in their everyday speech, in their interactions with people. Okay, so we see that it started with Jesus referencing the traditional teaching in verse 33. So let's read that. 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. So Jesus was referencing the traditional teaching. Now, look at this closely. You would see that it points back to Old Testament commands found in scriptures like Leviticus 19:12 and I believe Numbers 30, verse 2. So these commands prohibited false swearing and emphasized the importance of keeping any oath, any vow made to the Lord, particularly those invoking God's name. And it was to do this for 2 reasons. One, to guarantee truthfulness, and also to ensure that people keep any vow they make to the Lord. But here's what happened over time. The practice of oath taking among some Jewish leaders and the wider population developed some complexities and, in some cases, loopholes. So people would swear by things other than God's name. They would swear by heaven, by earth, by Jerusalem, and by their own head, thinking or believing that these oaths were less binding or had varying degrees of obligation. But here's what it did. It created this system where individuals could, in their minds, technically avoid breaking an oath to the Lord while still engaging in deceit and failing to keep their words in their everyday interactions with people. Okay? So the focus really shifted from truthfulness to really how an oath was sworn. So people just were trying to outsmart God. Can you imagine? They were like, no, we won't use the name of the Lord. Let's just use by heaven or by earth, right? Because, I mean, if we don't say, use God's direct name, then the oath will not be binding, right? So they were trying to be deceitful. They were trying to play smart. They were trying to be sneaky. Sneaky people. They're trying to be sneaky, right? Anyway, let's go to verse 34. So in verse 34, you see Jesus saying, but before I get into verse 34, let me quickly say this. Remember, this is still the Sermon on the Mount, right? A large multitude gathered. Jesus went up the mountaintop. His disciples followed him. They gathered around him, and then he started teaching them. Now, he was saying this to his disciples, but the crowds were still there, right? The crowds were still there, so they heard everything Jesus said. All right, verse 34. But I say to you, do not swear at all. So Jesus said to them, I say to you, do not swear at all. Now, think about this. This is a complete 360 degrees departure from what they were used to, right? From what they've been taught. But what was Christ trying to say? He was really reinforcing the prohibition against false swearing. But most importantly, he was challenging the very necessity of using words to validate their speech, using words to lend credibility to their words. Okay, so he was telling them, do not even take an oath at all. Do not take an oath at all. Okay, now let's complete that verse. Or let me read again. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne. 35 says, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. Meanwhile, I'm using the New King James Version, okay? Now, let's pause there. So Christ was practically telling them that this concept of using oaths to validate their speech is broken, it's flawed. He was saying that using oaths to lend credibility to your word is a flawed process. It's a flawed practice. There's no way There's no how you want to put it. It still involves God, right? And that was why he said, if you say by heaven, it is God's throne. It is God's dwelling place. So if you say by heaven, it still involves God. He also said by the earth. Were you not informed that the earth is his footstool? Everything under the earth is under the control and authority and dominion of God. So if you say by the earth, it still involves God. Now, if you say, okay, let me not use heaven or use the earth, let me use Jerusalem. Were you not told it is the city of the great king? It still carries the presence of God. Were you not told? So Christ was saying that one still involves God. Now, if you say, okay, let me use myself. Let me swear by my own head. Can you turn one hair on your head white or black? This one highlights our powerlessness. It highlights human powerlessness over even the simplest details of our being, right? The simplest details of our being. But most importantly, it highlights God's control, God's authority, God's dominion over everything, including me, including you, including everything. It shows how powerless really we are. So Christ was practically saying, there's no how you want to do it. There's no how you want to do it. It still involves God. There's nothing you want to say. It still involves God because he has control over everything. He has dominion over everything. He has authority over everything. Okay, that was what Christ was trying to tell them. So he was saying this idea of compartmentalizing oaths or creating categories of binding versus non-binding oaths based on what is invoked is a flawed practice. It's an irrelevant practice. It does not make sense. That was what Christ was practically saying, right? But this is the core of the message. This is the part that is so sweet. 37. When Christ says, but let your yes be yes, and your no be no. For whatever is more than this is from the evil one. You know, when I read verse 37, the first part was clear. It was easy to understand. But the second part, that part that says, whatever is more than this is from the evil one, I didn't quite understand it, but I was able to understand it after I did further studying, and I believe the Holy Spirit helped me too. So let's start with the first half of verse 37, where it says, well, let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Christ was just saying, hey, stick with the truth. Stick to the truth. Let your yes be yes. Say yes when you mean to say yes, and no when you mean to say no. Right? Don't try to play smart. Just stick with the truth. Truth. Stick to the truth. Okay. So he was trying to say this idea of using oaths to lend credibility to our words is somehow is not right. Instead, he was calling his followers to a life of consistent honesty and integrity, such that a simple yes or no is sufficient. You don't have to do anything more. Just yes or no is sufficient. In fact, he was saying, let your character be your bond. Let your character be your bond. Live a life of truthfulness. Live a life of integrity. Let people look at you and be like, that one. When they say yes, is a yes. So when they say yes, is a yes. Don't even think about it. Don't go there. Don't go there. This one, they're very truthful. That's the kind of life Christ is calling us, to live. So that's, in my opinion, what I got from there. He was practically saying, stick with truthfulness. Stick with truthfulness. Stick to the truth. Stick to the truth. Okay. Now, the second half where it says, for whatever is more than this is from the evil one. At first, I didn't get it, but I was able to, I believe that I have something that, in my opinion, makes sense. Okay. So I'm going to share it with you. I believe it suggests that the need to add oath, they need to add elaborate affirmations, they need to add anything along these lines to our words, to lend credibility to our words, stems from a realm of dishonesty or distrust, and these have their origin in evil. Let me repeat that again. This need to add forswearing, oath-taking, elaborate affirmations, elaborate confirmations to our words, or to lend credibility, power to our words, comes from a place of dishonesty or distrust, or let me put it this way, arises from a realm of dishonesty or distrust, which has its origin and evil. So Christ was saying, if let your default be truthfulness. If your default is truthfulness, then don't have to depend on any other thing to lend credibility to your words, right? Because if you have to do that, if you have to depend on some other thing to convince others that what you're saying is true, or what you're saying is true, then you're somehow indicating that there's some potential deceit in the equation, that there's some potential deceit, in the mix. I think that was what Christ was trying to say, and that's my understanding of what the later part of verse 37 talks about. So in all, we see Christ calling us to a life of truthfulness, a life of simplicity. And I think that part is key, simplicity. I find that if you explore Christ's messages, at their core, they're always simple, right? They're very simple at their core. Let your yes be a yes. Let your no be a no. Stick with truthfulness. Stick with truthfulness, because if you do that, then there'll be no need to swear. There'll be no need to depend on oath taking to convince any other person, right? Let your character speak for you. Let your character speak for you. Let your character be a bond. Let people see your lifestyle and be like, this one, as I said in my last video, what's in love for Christ? This one is different, okay? That's the kind of life Christ is calling us to. So 2 things I'll go home with today is simplicity, and also truthfulness. I think when it comes to truthfulness, let me defend him as a little bit. I think sometimes it's not like we plan to be deceitful, I feel like sometimes we want to be nice to the other person. We want to say things in a nice way. And in the process of trying to say it in a nice way, we dilute the truth. In the process of trying to make someone not feel bad about something, we dilute the truth. And I think Christ is just calling us, just stick with the truth. Stick with the truth. Because when you do that, then your words carry power. Then your words are valuable, right? Then your character becomes your bond. Then people look at you and they know, this one is different. This one is different. Anyway, may Christ continue to help us. May God continue to strengthen us in our walk with Him. May He continue to guide us. May He continue to give us the grace to be truthful and to stick with the truth. I'm just repeating the same thing. May He continue to just help us to stick with His word. Okay? And that's it for today. Please, if you have any contribution, any comments, put them in the comment section. And I will see you the next time I come back. Bye.